Before we go into part 4 of the story, tell us the country you are watching from, and let's do a quick flashback into part 3. Let me know if you are also enjoying this story. Far away in the shadows, a figure watched. Dante, broken and consumed by fury, clenched his fists as hatred burned through him like acid. And he vowed to the darkness, "If I cannot destroy them, I will make the child mine." The next morning, inside Zach's mansion, the morning sun rose over the battle-worn hills, casting long amber streaks through the tall, arched windows and bathing the marble floors in light. Outside the mansion gates, the villagers had gathered in quiet awe. Some clutched small charms, others whispered prayers and praises under their breath, not to a queen or a warrior, but to Amelia, the woman they now called Mistress of the Beast. She had not only faced the beast of ages, she had tamed it. Inside the dressing chamber, Amelia sat motionless before a grand gilded mirror as attendants moved around her, fastening a gown of shimmering white and gold. The fabric, soft as breath, clung to her like destiny. But Amelia's thoughts were distant. Her reflection was clear, her form regal, but her mind still lingered on the night before. On the roar of the beast, the crackling air, the moment the creature bowed its head not in submission but in recognition. It now slumbered deep within the eastern woods, not as a threat, but as a guardian. Outside the chamber door, the silence broke with footsteps. Zach entered, regal in his dark ceremonial robes, and his eyes softened the moment they found her. "You look like a goddess," Zach murmured, his voice carrying warmth even in the cool morning air. He approached her slowly, deliberately, as if trying not to shatter the fragile quiet around them. Amelia offered a nervous laugh, light but strained. "I don't feel like one," she replied softly, eyes flickering away from the mirror. Zach didn't hesitate. "You are," he said firmly, reaching out to lift her from the seat. As she rose, he cupped her face with a tenderness that silenced every doubt. "You tamed a monster last night without lifting a sword. That kind of strength comes from the soul." Amelia's lips parted to respond, but a deep horn blared from the village square, echoing like thunder across the valley. The door burst open, and Lucas appeared, breathless and flushed. "My lord, my lady, the council awaits. They request your presence. They wish to crown you, formally." Amelia's breath caught in her chest. "Crown us?" she whispered, the words heavy with disbelief. Zach turned to her, eyes gleaming with pride, his voice steady. "Yes, my love. Today you become what you were always meant to be." She looked at him, her heart pounding, and for a moment she believed him. By noon, the village square had transformed into a sea of banners, crimson and gold fluttering from every post. Hundreds had gathered, peasants in threadbare cloaks, noble families wrapped in furs, and warriors still bearing scars from the last siege. A grand dais had been erected overnight, towering at the heart of the square, and atop it stood the High Seer, ancient and unblinking. Her spine was bent with years, but her presence carried the weight of prophecy. Zach and Amelia stepped onto the platform side by side, their hands entwined as silence fell like snowfall across the crowd. The High Seer raised her staff, her voice sharp despite her age. "Before us stands the union of strength and purity, the destined rulers who have awakened the protector of our lands." She turned to Zach first. "Zach of House Valtori, do you swear to protect your people with your life?" "I swear," Zach replied without hesitation. Then the seer faced Amelia. "Amelia of the forgotten lineage, do you swear to uphold peace, justice, and compassion for all?" A tremble passed through Amelia, but Zach's hand tightened around hers. Courage surged like fire. "I swear." The seer placed the golden circlet on Zach's head, then crowned Amelia with a silver crown. The crowd erupted into thunderous celebration. Cries of "Long live our king and queen" filled the air as the people raised their arms in joyous unity. Amelia blinked against tears as she turned to Zach, who leaned down and kissed her deeply. It was not a kiss of ceremony or spectacle. It was a seal, a vow of love whispered in front of an entire kingdom. As trumpets blared and bells rang out across the valley, their reign began, not forged through bloodshed, but through devotion and destiny. Yet even as the square burst into music and laughter, far away in the dark, forgotten woods, a storm was beginning to churn. Deep in those shadows, Dante paced beneath the twisted branches, his jaw clenched, fists trembling. "She has the beast," he spat, "but more than that. She carries the seed of power inside her. The child." From behind the veil of trees, a figure emerged, an ancient sorcerer in tattered black robes, his voice dry and cracked like old parchment. "There is a way," the sorcerer rasped. "A ritual. A blood rite." Dante's eyes snapped up. "What must I do?" The sorcerer grinned with rotting teeth. "Steal the child. Bind its soul to yours. Then you will rule." Dante's stare hardened, a cold, deadly fire kindling in his chest. "Even if I must tear the child from her womb myself, I will," he growled. His eyes turned toward the mansion far in the distance, now lit with banners and song, his fists clenched tighter, his breathing shallow with rage. "Prepare everything," he ordered the sorcerer, voice low and dangerous. "Tonight we strike." Back at the mansion, night fell like a curtain of velvet, quiet and deceptive. In the royal chamber, Amelia tossed in her sleep, her brow furrowed, her hands gripping the silken sheets. Her dreams were not of celebration, but of shadows creeping toward her, of a cold hand reaching with fingers of smoke toward her belly. She gasped and jolted upright, heart hammering in her chest. Zack was instantly awake beside her, pulling her close. "What is it, Zia?" he asked, voice protective and low. Amelia clutched her stomach, eyes wide. I felt something evil. It's coming." Zack's jaw tensed. He rose swiftly, grabbing his sword from beside the bed. "Lucas!" he shouted. Moments later, Lucas burst into the room. "My lord?" "Double the guards. No one leaves or enters the grounds without my command," Zack barked. Amelia slowly stood, one hand resting gently on her abdomen, as an unfamiliar heaviness settled over her. The room around her, once filled with warmth and candlelight, now felt fragile, as if the joy from earlier that day had been built on a fault line. She could feel it within her, a quiet spark of life blooming just beneath her skin. Their child, a part of Zack, a part of her, and something deep within her, far beyond logic or fear, told her that the real battle hadn't yet arrived. The beast was only the beginning. Whatever darkness stirred out there in the forest, it was watching, waiting. Amelia looked out the tall glass windows toward the distant tree line, where moonlight touched the woods with a silver glow. She didn't know when the attack would come, but she knew it would. Her child's fate, her kingdom's future, was already under siege. As Zack placed his arm protectively around her and led her back toward the safety of the bedchamber, Amelia made a silent vow. No matter what the cost, she would fight for her child, for her people, for the light that had just begun to bloom in a world that desperately needed it. Midnight draped the land in a strange, suffocating stillness. No stars gleamed above, no wind stirred the leaves. The sky itself felt like a held breath, unnaturally still, like the world braced for something it couldn't name. Zack stood alone on the highest balcony of the mansion, his silhouette outlined against the dark sky, his eyes scanning the horizon with the trained precision of a seasoned warrior. Beside him, Amelia wrapped a thick cloak tightly around her growing form. Her breath was shallow, her pulse unsettled. Though the night was quiet, something in the air felt wrong, like the hush before a storm. Her instincts prickled, warning her of something just beyond the trees. Footsteps approached swiftly behind them. Lucas appeared, sword already drawn, his voice grim. "My lord, the guards report no movement, but the horses are restless. They sense something." Zack's jaw clenched as he narrowed his gaze toward the tree line. "Tell them to stay alert. This calm isn't natural." As if summoned by his words, a howl suddenly pierced the night. It wasn't from any ordinary beast. It was low, guttural, twisted, dripping with hatred. Amelia's hand flew to her belly as a cold shock passed through her, and then it began. From the shadows of the forest, the enemy surged. They came in waves, black-cloaked figures darting across the fields with impossible speed, faces hidden, weapons glinting wickedly in the faint moonlight. Their movement was silent at first, ghost-like, but at their centre strode Dante, clad in crimson armour that gleamed like fresh blood, his expression twisted with madness. His voice shattered the quiet. "Bring me the girl!" he roared. The guards on the walls responded immediately, crossbows raised. Arrows hissed through the air, raining down on the attackers, but the enemy didn't falter. They screamed in fury and charged forward with terrifying resolve. Zack turned sharply to Amelia, urgency burning in his voice, though he remained eerily calm. "Go to the inner chamber. Lucas will protect you. Do not engage them, Zia." Amelia opened her mouth to protest, but Zack... He silenced her with a kiss, fierce and desperate. "I'll find you, I swear it." And before she could argue, Lucas grabbed her hand, pulling her away from the balcony, down the spiralling stone staircases, deeper into the mansion's heart. Behind them, the sounds of battle began to rise. Metal clashing, men shouting, arrows slicing the air. The mansion had become a war zone. The inner chamber lay at the centre of the estate, a place most never entered, its walls carved with ancient runes and layered in spells older than memory. Designed as a final sanctuary, it was the safest room in the kingdom. Lucas bolted the heavy iron doors behind them and turned to stand guard, but Amelia barely noticed. Her breath came fast and uneven. Her heart thundered. She could feel the presence of the enemy outside, not just their movements, but their hatred. It seeped through the walls like smoke, thick and vile. And deeper still, something stirred within her. It began in her palms, a tingling warmth that turned to heat. Sparks leapt from her fingertips, her skin glowed faintly, and her breath caught. "What's happening to me?" she gasped. Lucas turned, eyes widening at the sight. "My lady, you're awakening your true power." Before either of them could say more, the heavy chamber doors shuddered violently, iron groaning under the weight of an unseen force. Another boom followed. Then another. The runes flared bright blue, resisting the assault, but cracks were beginning to form. Lucas stepped in front of her, sword drawn. "Stay behind me!" But Amelia's voice rose above the noise, sharp and fierce. "No, this time, I fight." Elsewhere in the mansion, Zack moved like a storm. His blade danced through the darkened halls, cutting down enemy after enemy in his desperate push toward Amelia. Blood soaked the front of his robes. His muscles screamed, his breath burned, but he did not slow. He couldn't. Every second mattered. He knew, somehow, that if Dante reached her before he did, everything would be lost. And deep in his chest, he felt her fear like it was his own. Back in the inner chamber, the doors gave way with a final, deafening crash. Splinters of metal and stone exploded inward. Dante strode through the wreckage, crimson armour gleaming under the flickering torchlight. His gaze landed on Amelia instantly. She stood in the centre of the room, glowing with raw, untamed magic, her hair floating around her like she was suspended in a storm. A twisted smile curled Dante's lips. "You're even more magnificent than I imagined," he said, voice slick with malice. "Come to me, my queen. Carry my air instead." Amelia didn't flinch. Her voice rang like a bell of judgment. "I belong to no one but Zack." Then Dante lunged, his blade raised, but Amelia's hands lifted, and with a scream she unleashed a blinding blast of energy. The force hit Dante squarely in the chest, hurling him backward into the stone wall with a sickening crack. He crumpled, unmoving. Lucas stared at Amelia, awe overtaking fear. "My lady," he breathed, but Amelia barely heard him. Her chest rose and fell with shallow gasps, her hands trembling with residual power. Just then, Zack burst into the room, sword still dripping red, eyes locking instantly onto hers. For a brief, beautiful moment, nothing else existed. "You're incredible," he said, crossing to her with pride and relief mingling in every step. But the moment shattered as Dante groaned, rising to his knees. Blood spilled from his mouth, but his voice was steady. "You think you've won," he hissed. "The ritual has already begun." Before their eyes, his body began to twist, his skin darkened, muscles bulging grotesquely, his eyes glowing like coals. Black veins crawled across his face as his shape morphed into something monstrous, a dark mimicry of the beast of ages, pulsing with hatred and dark magic. Amelia stumbled back, her arms instinctively shielding her belly. Zack stepped forward without hesitation, blade raised high, and from the eastern woods, deep and distant, the true beast, her protector, let out a roar that shook the world. And only one side would survive. Night cloaked the eastern woods in cool silence, the trees whispering ancient secrets as moonlight filtered through their leaves. The beast lay curled beside Zack and Amelia, its massive form coiled protectively around them like a living fortress. Its golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark, ever watchful. There was peace in that clearing, for a moment. An island of calm after chaos, but far beyond the trees, deep within the cursed mountains where no light ever lingered, Dante limped into a forgotten cave carved from jagged stone. His breath was ragged. Blood trailed behind him with every staggered step, staining the earth beneath his feet. Rage burned in him hotter than fire. "Fools!" he hissed, slamming his fist into the cavern wall. Blood splattered the stone, and with that blood he began drawing an ancient sigil, one the world hadn't seen since the age of the gods. Around him, the shadows shifted. Alive, responsive. The air turned thick with unnatural cold. As long-buried spirits answered his call, their whispers slithered along the walls. Dante's eyes gleamed with fury and madness. "If I cannot break them alone," he whispered, "then I will unleash what even the gods feared." And the darkness welcomed him home. Back at the mansion, Amelia sat before the tall mirror in her chamber, the soft candlelight casting gold across her face. Her eyes reflected back brighter than they had before, the irises almost glowing. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight that spilled through the open window. She looked changed, more than human. Changed by power, by love, by fate. Zack entered quietly, carrying a thick robe. He stepped behind her and draped it over her shoulders with care, crouching in front of her. "You're stronger than you think," he said gently, his hands resting on her knees. Amelia looked down at him, her voice trembling. "What if I can't control it, Zack? What if I hurt you, or the child?" Her hand moved instinctively to her belly. Zack reached up and cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks. "You won't," he said. "I trust you, and I'll teach you. We'll master it, together." For a long moment they stayed like that, their foreheads pressed together, the air between them humming, not with magic, but with a bond deeper than any spell. When Zack stood, he extended his hand. "Come," he said with a soft smile. "Your training begins now." Behind the mansion, in a hidden grove known only to a few, Zack led Amelia beneath the pale starlight to the ancient training grounds. The trees surrounding the space bowed as if honouring her presence. There, under the vast sky, he taught her how to channel the power that now surged inside her. She learned to summon light to her fingertips with a whisper, to speak to the beast through thought alone, to shield herself with pure, radiant energy. The power responded to her, but not without challenge. For every triumph came a burst of chaos. A single tear from her eye split the stone beneath her. A shout cracked the trunks of trees. But Zack remained by her side, calm and patient, never once wavering. He caught her when she fell, he held her when she trembled. Night after night they trained until they collapsed into one another's arms, laughing, breathless, covered in stardust and sweat. And day by day, Amelia grew. Not just stronger, but more certain. She was no longer just the woman who had tamed a monster. She was no longer just Zach's lover. She was becoming his equal, his protector, his queen. And the power within her began to sing. In the cursed mountain's heart, where the wind didn't blow and the air stank of death, Dante knelt in a circle of ashes. All around him, shapes began to form. Dark figures with twisted armor and hollow eyes, monstrous beings from the old world. These were the Forsaken Knights, warriors once chosen by the gods who had turned on their makers. Now they rose again, summoned by Dante's blood and rage. The air thickened as their leader emerged, wrapped in chains and smoke, his voice scraping through the shadows like broken glass. "You dare summon us?" he asked. Dante bowed his head, but his voice held steady. "I offer my soul," he said, "if you lend me your army." There was a long silence, then a chuckle like metal grinding against stone. "Bring us the child of the prophecy," the leader hissed, "and you shall have more than an army. You shall have the world." Dante smiled, and it was not a sane smile. It was the grin of a man reborn in fire and hatred. "Then it's time they learned what true fear is," he said, rising as the Forsaken closed around him, and the cave trembled with new, ancient evil. Later that night, the mansion lay still under the stars. Inside the royal chamber, Amelia rested with her head on Zach's chest, listening to the quiet rhythm of his heartbeat. His arms wrapped protectively around her, their legs entwined beneath the blankets, the world beyond their room forgotten for a little while. The window remained open, letting in the cool breeze. It smelled of lavender and night rain. She whispered into the silence, almost afraid to ask, "Do you think we'll survive what's coming?" Zach kissed the top of her head, his voice steady but soft. "We won't just survive," he said. "We'll win. Because what we have, our love, it's stronger than fate." Amelia smiled at that, a slow, quiet smile. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she felt peace begin to drift through her body like a lullaby. But far away, beyond the reach of that peace, thunder rolled over the cursed mountains. The sound echoed down through the valleys and forests like a warning. In the heart of that storm, evil had gathered its forces, and though the night was quiet now, the true battle had yet to begin. Huzzah! The next night, the village lay quiet beneath a sky of twinkling stars. Cool air drifted through the trees, brushing softly against the earth. Amelia stood at the mansion balcony, breathing in the stillness, until a sharp, prickling sensation ran down her spine. Trouble. Without a word, she turned and rushed back inside, finding Zach already strapping on his sword. His eyes met hers. They had both felt it. Lucas burst through the doors, panting hard. "My lord, my lady, we're under attack!" Zach's jaw tightened. "Who?" Lucas's face was pale. They call themselves the Forsaken Knights." Zach's eyes darkened instantly. "Dante!" Amelia stepped forward, unflinching. "Let's face them." Zach reached for the glowing blade beside him, a weapon forged by the beast's breath itself, and placed it firmly in her hand. Together, without another word, they charged into the night. At the village gates, chaos had already begun. Black, armoured figures stormed forward, their forms twisted and monstrous, their eyes burning like coals. Dark mist curled from their weapons as villagers screamed and fled for shelter. At the front of the horde stood Dante, cloaked in shadows and power, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Crackles of new magic danced along his armour, but just as the darkness approached the heart of the village, Zach and Amelia revived, flanked by Lucas, the guards, and the towering beast itself. The earth quaked beneath their feet as the beast let out a thunderous roar, shaking even the stars above. Amelia lifted her sword high, and a shield of golden light erupted around the village, forming a radiant barrier that halted the invaders. The Forsaken Knights snarled, crashing against the shield like waves against stone. Dante only laughed. "You can't hide behind walls forever, Zia. Sooner or later, you'll kneel before me." Amelia's voice cut through the madness, clear and fierce. "I kneel to no one but my heart, and my heart belongs to Zack." Zack smiled proudly, his love for her blazing in his eyes. And then, without warning, the battle began. The beast charged into the enemy ranks, roaring and tearing through the Forsaken Knights like paper. It tossed them aside as if they weighed nothing. Zack moved like a storm, his sword slicing through the darkness with practiced precision. By his side, Amelia was a force of her own. Waves of golden magic burst from her hands, knocking back wave after wave of dark soldiers. Lucas and the guards held the lines with everything they had, fighting to protect the village and its people. For a moment, it looked like they might win quickly. But then Dante lifted his hands and summoned something darker, something older. From the shadows, a monstrous serpent emerged, its massive body covered in scales like obsidian, its many heads hissing and snapping. The serpent struck the shield with a crash that shook the ground. Cracks spread across the golden barrier. Amelia staggered back, blood trickling from her nose. Zack caught her before she fell. "Don't give up," he urged. "We're almost there." Amelia's eyes blazed. Gritting her teeth, she lifted her sword high. With a cry of pure will, she unleashed every ounce of power inside her. Light, life, and love. In one final blinding strike. The sky split open. A beam of golden fire erupted from her sword, slamming into the serpent and vaporizing it in an instant. The ground shook with the force of the blast, and the enemy ranks shattered in its wake. The Forsaken Knights screamed and scattered, fleeing into the night like shadows before the sun. Dante roared in fury, watching everything he had summoned crumble beneath her light, with his plans shattered. For now. He vanished into the darkness, retreating with the remnants of his horde. The battle was over. Victory was theirs. But the feeling of relief was tempered by the silence that followed. The night held its breath again, and though they had won this battle, everyone knew in their hearts it was only the beginning of something much, much worse. Back inside the mansion, Amelia collapsed into Zack's arms, her body trembling from exhaustion, her heart still racing. Outside, the villagers cheered, celebrating their heroes with songs and firelight, but Zack carried her gently upstairs away from the noise. He laid her softly on their bed, brushing her hair away from her face. "You were magnificent," he whispered. Amelia managed a faint smile. "So way." He kissed her forehead, then pulled the blanket over her. "Rest now, my queen. We'll need all our strength for what's coming." Because deep down they both knew Dante wasn't defeated, not truly. The real war hadn't yet begun. And next time he wouldn't come with just monsters or soldiers. He would come for something far more precious. He would come for the child growing inside her. Far away, in the dark lands, the night hung heavy with smoke and ash. The air was thick, poisoned by decay and old curses. In a shattered temple, buried deep within that forsaken realm, Dante paced like a caged beast, fury radiating from every movement. His battered, forsaken knights knelt in shame around him, heads bowed, armor cracked from their recent defeat. Beside him stood his advisor, a hooded figure cloaked in shadows, his voice slithering through the gloom. "You must act now, my lord," the advisor hissed. "While she carries the child, her powers remain unstable. The child is the key. If you bind it to yourself before birth, you will command the beast and all her magic." Dante's blood-red eyes gleamed with hunger. "And if she resists?" The advisor's lips curled into a wicked grin. "Then we tear her soul apart." Dante threw his head back and laughed. A cruel, hollow sound that echoed across the blackened stones. "Prepare the ritual," he commanded, "and send word to the Shades of Morning. I want every monster, every cursed creature, every forsaken knight ready for war." His voice dropped to a growl. Tonight, I take everything from her, starting with her child." Meanwhile, back in the peaceful village, a deceptive calm blanketed the land. Preparations buzzed beneath the surface, quiet, focused, desperate. Guards trained harder than ever before, their bodies drenched in sweat and determination. Arcane runes were carved into the ground, forming glowing barriers of ancient magic around the perimeter. Inside, villagers stockpiled food and whispered prayers, their eyes frequently scanning the sky. Inside the mansion, Amelia sat on a cushioned chair near the tall windows, her hands resting gently over her growing belly. A strange warmth pulsed there, stronger than ever before, almost sentient. She felt it respond to her breath, her fear, her hope. Zack entered the room with a heavy heart, cloaked beneath a calm face. He crossed to her and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I swear on my life, Zia," he said, eyes locked with hers. "Nothing will ever harm you or our child. Even if I must fight every shadow in this cursed world." Amelia cupped his face in her hands, her voice trembling with love. "I don't fear the darkness, Zack, not when I have you by my side." They held each other fiercely, unaware that outside the sky had begun to darken again. That night, the great hall of the mansion blazed with torchlight and tension. Every warrior, every elder, and every able villager had gathered. Weapons gleamed, armor clanked, and eyes burned with silent determination. Zack stood at the center of it all, a pillar of strength, while the beast loomed behind him, massive, silent, ancient. Its presence filled the room with unspoken power. Lucas stepped forward and unrolled a wide parchment across the war table. "Scouts have spotted Dunce's forces," he announced, voice grave. "They number in the thousands, and they are no longer human." Murmurs rippled through the hall, fear and awe mixing like oil and flame. Zack slammed a fist onto the table, the sound silencing the crowd. "They may have numbers," he declared, his voice hard as steel, "but they do not have what we have." He turned and looked directly at Amelia, who stood at the far side of the room, glowing with quiet power. "They do not have love. They do not have loyalty. They do not have hope." A roar of agreement shook the hall. Villagers banged swords against shields, and the beast let out a deep growl that made the very walls tremble. War was coming, and they would not kneel. Later that night, once the council had dispersed and the torches burned low, Zack and Amelia stood side by side at their chamber window. The stars glittered above, indifferent to the fate of mortals. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, her gaze distant. "I feel him," she whispered. "Dante. His hatred presses against my skin like a storm about to break." Zack moved behind her, pulling her into his arms, wrapping her in warmth and steel. "Let him come," he whispered into her hair. "We'll burn his darkness away." Amelia closed her eyes, listening to the sound of his heart, steady, strong, the rhythm of a man who would give everything for her. She had once been a broken girl, sold for money, abandoned by those meant to protect her, but not anymore. Now she was a queen, a mother, a warrior, and tomorrow she would face the very nightmare that had once haunted her dreams, not with fear, but with fire. Days later, a strange change. The air in the mansion was thick with a fragile balance of hope and fear. It lingered in the hallways, clung to the drapes, and hung in the silence between breaths. Amelia stood before the tall mirror in her room, her hands gently resting over her stomach. In only a few days, her body had changed, her belly, once flat, now curved with the undeniable sign of life. But it wasn't normal. The growth was rapid, laced with energy that pulsed just beneath her skin. This wasn't just a child, it was something ancient, something touched by magic. Zack entered quietly, his gaze going straight to her reflection. Without a word, he stepped behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her waist. "You're glowing," he whispered into her hair. Amelia gave a soft smile, but worry lingered in her eyes. "It's happening too fast, Zack. What if something's wrong?" He turned her gently to face him. Nothing is wrong, Zia. You carry the blood of light and the spirit of kings. Our child is special. She leaned into his chest, drawing calm from his steady heartbeat. Just then, Lucas rushed in, breathless and urgent. "My lord, my lady, you must come to the great hall immediately."